Welcome back, everyone. We're Simply Bitcoin. We break down the news, the daily fail, meme review, software releases, hardware releases, and the pleb sites. Joining us today, return guest, very special guest, fellow Bitcoiner, and Chief Strategy Officer at the Human Rights Foundation. I'm talking about Alex Gladstein. Alex, it's a pleasure to have you back again. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me back, guys.
All right, here we go. We are diving into the numbers. Let's do it, Nico.
Number time. Brought to you by Nodl. They make some of the best Bitcoin nodes, like the Nodl Dojo. It's in red. That means it's faster. Run your own version of Bitcoin Core and the Lightning Network, all in the comfort of your own home. Remember, guys, if you don't run your own Bitcoin node, you're using someone else's. That's a big no-no for privacy. So get yourself a Bitcoin node Nodl today.
At the time of this recording, the block height is 736,114. The Bitcoin price, 28,390. Chain rewrite days, 724. Total public Lightning capacity, 3,794.1. I'm pretty sure that's a new all-time high. Definitely bigger than yesterday. Anyways, Moscow time, 3522. Blocks to the halving, 103,886. And the Samurai Whirlpool unspent capacity. Samurai Whirlpool is a coin join or collaborative spend. It is not a mixing service. And the unspent capacity of that pool is 4,677.77 BTC. Nico, the uneventful numbers.
The numbers, man. It's another good day to stack. Anyways, I picked a very interesting topic today to talk about during the number time. We've been covering this, right? As you know, events transpired, we've come to this conclusion that there's clearly a combined effort worldwide to attack proof of work. You see that in European politicians. They put out a vote, it failed. In New York State, it looks like they're having a little bit more success. So I'm gonna read a tweet real quick to kind of give a little bit of context. But we want to ask, we want to take advantage of the fact that Alex is on the show. We want to ask him what his opinion is on that. So let me pull it up. So I tweeted this not too long ago. I said, have you noticed that every single new political attack on Bitcoin's proof of work also mentions the alternative proof of stake is a better solution, right? And just to kind of give you guys a couple of examples, right? They the Senate had an oversight committee on this. It was literally called Cleaning Up Cryptocurrency. EU security regulators recommends ban on proof of work. It even went to a vote. Thankfully, that failed, right? Proposed ban on proof of work in New York State. That actually went through. And of course, you know, the World Economic Forum and, you know, there are many, many tweets and videos, right? The famous one where Bitcoin's going to consume more energy than exists by the year 2022. They ended up being wrong on that. So, Alex, you know, the first couple times we were like, maybe this is a coincidence. Maybe these people are uninformed. But over time, it started to become clear to us that we believe, at least, and maybe we're being a little bit paranoid. I think Bitcoiners are paranoid by nature because they're so used to being attacked. Is this a combined effort? Is this an attack on proof of work? Is it malicious? Is it on purpose?
Well, some of it certainly is coordinated and paid for by companies like Ripple, who issue their own altcoins or whatever. That's very clear and obvious, and they've been able to sadly convince a lot of people to jump on their train. Convince might be a euphemism. Sometimes they pay them to jump on their train with them. They still have a lot of money, even though their token is careening, you know, over time towards zero. Let's not forget they were at one point on paper richer than Bezos or something crazy like that, right? Several years ago. So the problem is these folks they still have huge amounts of fiat dollar capacity to burn on campaigns like this, and their only hope is to criticize proof of work as dangerous so that they can promote their own project. That goes for both the shitcoiners and the central bankers. I mean, they're both promoting their own version as better, right, than Bitcoin. So I think we can expect the attacks on proof of work and on Bitcoin as wasteful and unnecessary to just accelerate. I think the good news is that over time, as more and more people look at Bitcoin more deeply, they're going to start to understand that that's mostly nonsense. Like, yes, of course, Bitcoin is going to use more energy in the future, but that's not a bad thing. If you actually look at it in the total sum of what it's doing, It's a very good use of energy, in my opinion, and electricity, and it provides enormous value for like tens of millions of people around the world. So, that's going to be something that you just see intensify. I don't think it's all like directed by one shadowy group. I think it's, generally speaking, the establishment is already a willing ally. Like they're already happy to, if you ask anybody who works at a major bank or a central bank or a Davos type organization, like, hey, would you promote this like attack on Bitcoin for me? They're going to be like, of course. I mean, they don't need any additional coercion or persuasion to do so. And I do think this will be the big narrative battle for a while, is going to be this. And I wouldn't say it's the last one. I still think we're going to have one around privacy and KYC, AML, that sort of thing. But that seems to have taken a back seat to the environment piece, which of course will intensify during bull market periods of Bitcoin. Right now people are like, whatever. But when Bitcoin starts to more visibly succeed in the eyes of the mainstream media, that's when they go on the attack, right? So we saw this all last year, like the New York Times saying, oh, we've heard Bitcoin's going to switch to proof of stake, stuff like that. They had to retract that because that was obviously wrong. But I think that this is the attack vector that they're going to go after. Thankfully, it's also the attack vector that's not going to go anywhere. Like they're not going to stop people from mining Bitcoin globally. And honestly, they don't have they being Ripple obviously has an interest, but US jurisdictions don't necessarily have an interest. In fact, a lot of US jurisdictions have an interest in incentivizing or subsidizing mining in their areas or districts or states. So, I mean, I think that, we're in this interesting time where you might have the Biden administration or Treasury come after Bitcoin in the coming year or two, but starting in about a year and a half, summer 2023, everybody's going to be thinking about the 2024 elections. So I think even if we have some draconian laws put in place around non-custodial use of Bitcoin or God knows what else, mining with a particular kind of energy, you may start to see those start to change or be walked back before the 2024 general. Like if you've got somebody like Trump, who knows, he may start to buy into this party line that's being parroted by an increasing number of Republicans, that basically Bitcoin is a good thing for Americans. Who knows? If he starts doing that, then I don't know. I see this as a thing that in the future, you're not going to want to be anti-Bitcoin, from a democratic perspective, from an electoral perspective. That's going to be a losing proposition, in my opinion, just based on trends of the sheer number of Americans that own Bitcoin and that will continue to buy Bitcoin and use it. That seems like a losing proposition, which is good for America and makes us diametrically opposed to China, where the Communist Party doesn't have to have elections. They don't give a shit about what its people think. They don't have to. They don't care. They're dictators. So I think it gives America a very interesting mechanism for change, and it gives me a little bit of hope that we'll be able to fight through this. But the short answer is yes. All this stuff is definitely an attack on Bitcoin.
Well, that's good to hear, man. You confirm what, two plebs on Twitter, came to that conclusion ourselves. And it's interesting because you're mirroring, or you're basically saying something similar to what NVK, the founder of CoinKite, said when he came on the show, which is, in democracies specifically, it's going to be extremely unpopular to go against Bitcoin. So I'm glad that you guys are, basically saying the same thing. Eventually.
It takes time. But it's going to happen, gradually, then suddenly, 2024. But I think by the time the 2028 election is upon us, I'm assuming it's going to be political suicide to be super anti-Bitcoin. Yeah. But we'll have to see.
Well, Phil, you want to add to that?
I was just going to say, time is definitely on our side, and, we just had two aspiring politicians join us, and they are quote unquote Bitcoin friendly. I put that in quotes because politics, so I don't like to place too much importance on it. The only other little piece that I wanted to add about the attacks on proof of work is that Consensus is attempting to work with the World Economic Forum for a CBDC design paper as well, right? They presented some paper regarding this, and we actually covered it on the fail, and it's absolutely horrendous, right? They obviously bash proof of work. They barely mention Bitcoin in any way, shape, or form, and all they do essentially is it's a giant marketing ploy as to why proof of stake and why we should be involved in this. So it's really scary stuff, and unfortunately they have the funds and they've got the eyeballs for now, anyways.
Absolutely. Anyways, Phil, that's a good time for
the Daily Fail, brought to you by Swan. Check them out, swanbitcoin.com. That's right, it is a DCA platform where the plebs can stack, and it's by fellow plebs, and they're gonna have an app soon. Automated Bitcoin savings plans, instant purchases. The link is down below. That's right, we keep getting tagged in more Luna garbage as the debacle that is Luna is falling apart. So we're going to dive into this latest article, which covers something else that's happened with Luna. This is May 12th, 2022, right? Today, Luna issuer TERRA halts blockchain after week of losses. Interesting.
Super decentralized, bro.
So it's interesting that you bring that up, Nico, because we have a comment from one of our viewers. Maybe it's even my doppelganger, I'm not sure, but here we go. The Luna governance token and several algorithmic stablecoins. The price of Luna fell too low to prevent the governance attacks, citing Luna inflation as one factor. Luna fell in price from nearly $120 in early April to between 1 and 2 cents on Thursday. So, no transactions with UST, Luna, or Terra's other cryptocurrencies can be processed. Token holders will have to wait for the blockchain to restart. This brings us to Copernicus's comment. He asked us about this today. He goes, "Good morning, Simply Bitcoin. Can you please spend the next fail segment explaining to us how this shitcoin was ever decentralized? Note, they confirmed that they are not centralized and are in fact a decentralized shitcoin, so you can use that as a reason. Go." Okay, so I did some digging. Here's how they're decentralized. Found their docs, right? The TERRA docs. They've got an active validator set of up to 130 validators. And these validators hold the most Luna. So there you go. There's an argument for decentralization. And it's trustless. That's pretty much all we've got. But the thing that we know for sure, the thing that we know absolutely is that they were able to stop the blockchain today. This decentralized organization was able to stop it. So that obviously makes no sense. Copernicus, unfortunate, I can't pronounce your name, even though you're supposedly me and I'm you. I can't tell you why it's decentralized, because it's not. Okay? So I'm sorry, I failed at the fail. I can't do it. Somebody else, interestingly enough, a shitcoiner, did bring up this chart, which I think is pretty funny. And it just goes to illustrate how much bigger these scams are getting. Okay, this is from at Trustless State, the 2022 collapse of Luna superimposed over the 2018 collapse of BitConnect. Take a look. It dwarfs it, man, by magnitudes. This is insane. Completely insane. Okay, now before I finish this off, I just want to finish this off, the Luna segment, of course, with just a quick tweet from Adam Back. Okay? Of course, we got to go see, because Adam always has great wisdom. We just got to go check it out. Really sorry for those who lost in TERRA, Money, Luna, UST DeFi. Please learn Ponzi risk warnings are volunteer education for public safety. Don't be fooled by maximalist retorts of promoters. It's a marketing pitch from Ponzi promoters to take your money. And guys, this is what we've been telling you all along. Adam Back is one of the original people cited in the Bitcoin white paper. Now, I'm not saying that that's some, believe his creds. No, believe his work. He has proof of work. There's actual work that's in this. This guy understands this very well. So if he's saying something like this, quite possibly, it's worth a little bit more than a grain of salt, and just maybe you should dig into it and not let yourself get rug pulled. Alex, let me ask you, have you been following the debacle that is Luna? And if so, what are your thoughts for the listeners?
Well, it's really funny because 2 years ago, I just want to try to pull up this tweet. I actually got into like a back and forth about Luna with this guy whose handle is, he blocked me, so I don't. QWQIAO. He's some prominent kind of crypto guy. And in the summer of 2020, we got into an argument over Luna, and back then nobody cared about Luna or whatever, but he was trying to claim that it had like massive adoption in Korea or whatever. And I was just like, nah, dude. And he's deleted all of his tweets, but it's interesting to go back to that, and that it's just this glimmer of the future. And yeah, I mean, look, as even people who are not maximalists and will say, it's the most devastating collapse in cryptocurrency history, essentially. I mean, we've never seen a top 10 asset before go to zero so fast. And it's true, you're right, that it's kind of amazing, the quality, I guess we call the quality into question, but let's say the fame and prominence of the investors that were involved, like all the mainstream kind of Silicon Valley, Wall Street crypto firms were like investing in this project. And remember, there was talk like 2 days ago of them coming in with like a bailout. Guess the bailout didn't happen. Yeah. So I don't know. I think it was also interesting because there was this whole back and forth in March, right, over like, isn't it a big deal that they're buying all this Bitcoin? And it was an interesting period of time, I think. You had a couple people, prominent people on Bitcoin Twitter, basically saying it's a big deal, and then you had other people saying it's not a big deal for different reasons. There's a huge dispute. So I think it's good to revisit that. And my personal opinion is that I believe in hyper Bitcoinization over time. So in the far future or whatever, I believe that Bitcoin will be the pristine financial collateral for all economic markets, essentially. Like it'll take the role, not just in the crypto space, but in the world global space of what the US dollar and the treasury do today, which is act as kind of a pristine financial collateral of last resort. Like countries today run out of money. When they run out of money, what they're really doing is they're running out of dollars, and they can't print dollars. So they can print their own money, of course, but they can't print dollars. So this is why you see countries like Sri Lanka collapse. This was the whole story behind the Asian financial crisis. Like all those countries lost dollars, and then they lost the peg to the dollar, and they started printing their own currency, and it goes to zero. And this is similar to what happened with Luna. The supply of Luna increased from 386 million to 7 billion in just 2 days. So, you had hyperinflation of Luna based on the mechanism, the broken mechanism that they tried to pack it up by. But basically, I guess what I'm saying is that I think in the far future, all things, companies, crypto projects, trash altcoins, whatever, they're all going to trend towards some sort of reliance or relationship on Bitcoin, whether they denominate themselves in sats, whether they save in sats as the ultimate savings account. And obviously the Luna thing was like I would say a particularly hilarious interpretation of that. But I think it's a tremor of what's going to happen in the future. Meaning, like, if you're some trash altcoin promoter in 2 years, you're probably not going to be saving in some other crypto. Like, you're probably going to be saving as a company in either the dominant fiat currency or in Bitcoin. Mm-hmm. So I guess my theory or thesis here is that you're going to continue to see all kinds of companies and organizations, including nation states, by the way, which have armies and kill people. You're going to start seeing them adopt Bitcoin. And one of my takeaways was that, like, a lot of Bitcoiners were pissed off that the Ukrainian government started raising money in Bitcoin. I was basically like, Bitcoin doesn't give a fuck. Like, a lot of Bitcoiners were pissed that these altcoiners were raising Bitcoin. Bitcoin doesn't really care. My point was that any kind of rational economic actor over the coming decade will adopt Bitcoin, regardless of who they are or who you care about. And I view that as pretty bullish. So that's my general takeaway. I think it was important to not be. It was a tricky time because you had to be. If you were trying to explain that, you had to do it in a way where it didn't sound like you were promoting Luna or telling your followers to buy Luna, right? So there was a smattering of like, I don't know where everybody fell, where you all believe everybody fell on that scale, but certainly like it was a highly discussed topic and everybody had a take on it, for about a month. But generally speaking, my thought was, this is inevitable. Like all these fucking people are going to be attracted to Bitcoin at one level or another. And it doesn't matter whether they're a nation state you don't like, or whether they're an army or whether they're an altcoin, a trash altcoin, or whether they're, a Fortune 500 company that you don't like. To me, it doesn't really matter. They're all going to be forced to, over time, adopt Bitcoin either to denominate what they're doing or as a savings asset. So that's kind of my take on the matter.
Phil?
Yeah, no, I really appreciate that. And you know what? It's very interesting that you mention the Bitcoiners and Luna, just because I believe that we talked about it several months ago and we had announced, right, that they were going to have Bitcoin as part of their reserves. And I remember saying, make no mistake, it's a shitcoin at the end of the day. This is all just a gimmick to get you to trust. That's the way I see it. But to your point, right, if people really want to save, at the end of the day, all of these companies, right, they may not say it out loud or anything like that, but in the background, they are going to be looking at Bitcoin and they're going to be saving in Bitcoin.
Wait, but like, I guess the point is, of course, I think there's a group of Bitcoiners who like were under no illusions. Obviously, it's a shitcoin. The question was it good for Bitcoin? So the question was like, and I'll just say that some people were like, hey, I'm not going to name names, but some people were like, this is good for Bitcoin because it will, hey, look, they're going to buy more Bitcoin than Michael Saylor. Nick Carter was actually like, nah, this is not going to be good for Bitcoin because it's eventually going to blow up. I was with Nick about a week ago and he was like telling me, no, this is so bad. Like for these reasons, like you can't back a fiat stablecoin with Bitcoin. It doesn't work. And, he listed all these reasons and it was very compelling. And then of course, fucking 2 days later, the whole thing blows up. I mean, I don't even think he was one of the more prominent people explaining why it wouldn't work. And it's not even like he was going to say it's going to blow up on Saturday. Like that I think very, very few people thought it would blow up now. I think that credit to him and many others in the Bitcoin community who were like, nah, this isn't going to work. But I think it's a good lesson that, I mean, again, it's hard to argue that anything's bad for Bitcoin, right? That's a difficult argument. And generally speaking, again, my observation was that this is just the beginning of a long-term trend of this whole space, which I think is just going to increase. Like today you have, I was shocked. Like, I don't know, when I last paid attention to like 4,000 cryptocurrencies a couple of years ago, apparently that was like 20,000 on CoinMarketCap. All right. So most of these are 99.99999% of them are like floating space junk. I mean, they're just like, but once humans realize they can just, when the three of us realize we can spin up money and then just like mint it and then like try to get some exchange to value it. Like I don't think you can put that genie back in the bottle. Like people will always seek immediate satisfaction and they're always trying to be hustling for some sort of easy money edge. So it's going to be cyclical in my opinion, but I don't buy a future in 5-10 years where there's like less cryptocurrencies. There will probably be just like a shit ton of them and like they'll all be completely fucking useless and have no value. But like I can't imagine a world where like people don't continue to think up of new schemes. Like, remember we had like Grin and like whatever. Yep. Oh, it was like the Bitcoin friendly. No. Like, so we're going to go through whatever this cycle is. And then on the other side, you're going to have the next Grin or whatever. Yep. And it's going to be like, oh, this is the like coin that Bitcoiners should, whatever. So it's just so cyclical. I mean, it's so obviously cyclical. So I think it's a good lesson though, like as a reminder, like, I've reflected on it certainly. If you're going to say this is part of hyper Bitcoinization or that it is inevitable that shitcoins will like, whether it's buy more Bitcoin or whatever. This is kind of EOS did this 5 years. Remember how EOS raised $4 billion?
Absolutely.
Guess what? EOS, you have nothing. EOS is now $1, and they have 100,000 Bitcoin. So, you don't want to be giving your Bitcoin to anybody.
Yeah, especially the enemy, man. Because at the end of the day, that's what shitcoins are. They're enemies of Bitcoin. Just that's what they are. So, I completely agree.
Yes, you want to be careful, but I think there's like, I don't know. I think that there's different theories on this. I was talking with Carvalho today about this, and he thinks that there's like essentially that shitcoins are just competing with Bitcoin, and they won't rely on them in any way. And I haven't quite gotten the full picture of what he envisions the world to look like in like 10 years, but I feel like it's kind of like he's saying that these things are all going to go away or something like that. And sadly, I just don't think that's the case. I think that that's like kind of naive to think, if that's what he thinks, that we're not going to have shitcoins in the future. I unfortunately think that's a sort of part of human nature. The good news is I think Bitcoin will become increasingly dominant and widely used by everybody, whether you're a good faith businessman making a business that produces, capital income and is growing and is providing jobs and stuff, or whether you're a useless altcoin promoter. You're probably going to use Bitcoin either way in the future. And that's just something that I think is important to recognize, that we're not going to get to control who gets to use Bitcoin.
Yep.
It's just, and if you believe in Bitcoin, you must believe in that, right?
Absolutely.
So it's a tough thing to wrap your mind around, though, right?
I mean, but it kind of functions the same, and this is we always bring the analogy, which is Bitcoin, and it kind of functions the same way as freedom of speech, right? And there's a very, very famous Voltaire quote, right? I might not like what you have to say, but I'll die defending it, or something like that. And I think it functions with that similar principles, right? You have to be okay with the fact that your worst enemy might use Bitcoin, and you have to be okay with the fact that he should be able to transact, right? Because I don't think there's any other way. I'll leave it at that. Phil, it's time for
the Daily Meme Review.
Brought to you by Citadel 21. They make the best Bitcoin cultural zines, stories, articles, comics by actual Bitcoiners. This is pure pleb signal in here. Every volume has different artwork. This is the artwork for volume 10. This is the artwork for volume 11. It just dropped, and they're scarce. There's only 1,000 physical copies made per volume, so get your prints of Citadel 21 today before they run out. All right, everybody, welcome to the Meme Review, where we review Bitcoin memes. Anyways, let's check out this first meme by the legendary Lena Sheesh. She's referencing the current crash, and here are the plebs pulling it up. It's more like an artwork, this one. We got the Bitcoin class of 2017, class of 2017, class of 2022. The first cycle is always the hardest, and this includes Sailor, by the way. Anyways, third meme by Dennis Hoddle. Do you remember when we called the 58 Kang Bears? I remember. Oh, man. All right, moving on to the next one. It was by Doc Bitcoiner 18 hours ago. Rip Bitcoin, and then a tombstone, right? They always say Bitcoin's dead, but Honey Badger always comes back. This is Croesus. They want to take your Bitcoin. Stay safe. Just hodl. Cord storage. Bitcoin plebs. Wall Street Titans. Luna. There was a rumor around that Luna... Here, let me go back because Alex needed to see it.
Yeah, I see it. Yeah.
So there was a rumor that Luna was taken by BlackRock and some other, but that ended up being not true.
That's bunk, yeah.
Yeah, it was BS. Okay, so I wonder what the next shitcoin scam will be. Yeah, and this is what Alex was talking about not too long ago, right? The ICOs, DeFi, NFTs. What is next? Who knows, right? Next one by RD_BTC. Looks like the Bitcoin maxis are right again. Awesome, RD. All right, last one by Honk Holden, Bitcoin plebs in 2045. I don't think this is the future that Alex envisioned, but I'll take it.
This is Honk's future that he...
The Fed, the Illuminati, the BlackRock. Okay. Awesome memes. Thank you, plebs. Yeah. Appreciate it. For that, I'm going to give it Alex's book. Check your financial privilege. Look at that artwork. It's very nice. That's my score. Alex, Thanks. What would you give those memes?
I would give a Bitcoin grenade.
Ooh,
that's what I would give
that's our sponsor. You can take advantage of the promo code down below to get 5% off. Phil, what would you give those memes?
So Zorn gave me a hard time on my terrible meme score yesterday, so I came prepared and I upped the game. I am giving it this piece of artwork from MV Dex.
Oh.
That's right. It's still in the wrapping, though, because I haven't hung it up yet.
Very nice. Wow, you pulled out the big guns today, Phil.
Right, I did.
Anyways, guys, we want to know if you agree with our scores, disagree. Let us know down in the comment section. Make sure to subscribe to us on alternative video platforms like rumble.com, personal favorite, bitcointv.com. They don't censor it because Bitcoin TV. And join our Telegram group where you can link us some awesome memes to review. But anyways, Phil, it's time for
the Daily News.
Brought to you by CryptoCloaks.com. They make some of the best 3D printed Bitcoin merch, like the famous 3D printed Bitcoin grenade toy. Comes in any custom color your heart desires. That's right, they even have it in gold, so you know this pisses Peter Schiff off. And they have these awesome 3D printed Bitcoin honey badgers. You can take advantage of the promo code down below to get 5% off CryptoCloaks.com. All right, guys, so Alex wrote this awesome book, and it's funny because we've actually been covering some of his articles that a lot of that content made it into the book. Correct me if I'm wrong, Alex, of course.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, and we've been talking about this, a lot of the naysayers, a lot of the people that go against Bitcoin, Alex says it perfectly. They come from a place of financial privilege. They don't live in a country where the currency is hyperinflating, or they don't live in a country that is totalitarian. We've given you many examples, right? Either the Cubans, the Afghanis, the Venezuelans, that
the lunatics.
The lunatics, right? That the U.S. government decided that those people aren't worthy of having access to the global financial system. So, right, that's where Bitcoin comes in. So I'm going to read some of the passages very quick, and I'm going to ask Alex to elaborate a little bit of this. This is directly from the preface. I used to say preface, and then Phil corrected me. Anyways, it says, from Sudan to Palestine, from Belarus to Nigeria, from the Congo to Cuba, tens of millions of people are currently using Bitcoin to escape from broken financial systems and lay the foundation for a brighter future for their families and communities. But as we enter 2022, it is still apparent that the mainstream media and political discourse does not understand or even acknowledge this phenomenon. Why is that, Alex?
So first of all, I think that when it comes to the media has a mechanism inside of it that has prevented it from like accurately covering Bitcoin, and part of it is their attempt to be ethical, right? So what has happened over the last decade is that, like, at major media publications, you weren't able to like hold and own Bitcoin if you reported on it, right? So this resulted in some extremely salty reporters who may have done some good reporting on Bitcoin 10, 8, 7, 6, 5 years ago. But because they weren't ever allowed to use it as money for themselves, they became really like sour about it over time, very salty. And this partially explains why 95+% of all mainstream media reporting in America, in Europe, in Asia, Africa, etc., newspaper, radio, television, over the last decade has been hugely negative on Bitcoin, that it's dangerous, risky, for criminals, going to kill the world, blow up, good, be too volatile, boil the oceans, whatever. They've been like hammering this point home, which is crazy given that the reality is that it was dangerous and risky to not have Bitcoin. So I think that the media is going to have a reckoning at some point. I mean, they basically derailed the world on Bitcoin. It's really sad
on
and
a
tragic.
lot of things also. It's not
on a lot of other things too.
A lot of other things.
Well, and it's like the Gelman amnesia thing where like you start to realize that they're wrong on Bitcoin and shit, maybe they're wrong on like all these other things.
No, the internet just completely ripped the Band-Aid off, right? It was Jack Posobiec. He said something so fascinating, and I want to get your thoughts on this. He said that if social media was around in 2003, the U.S. wouldn't have been able to go to war in Iraq.
Maybe.
I thought that was so insightful. So, Alex, in chapter...
Oh, and just so that's the media, but the banks and governments, like, they have a different agenda for going on the attack of Bitcoin, because Bitcoin takes their power away. So they're going to be extremely self-interested to protect their proof of stake, empire.
You're saying there's like an evil alliance there, right?
Yeah, definitely. It's Bitcoiners versus the world, right? I mean,
Bitcoiners versus the world. Okay, so Alex, in chapter 3, it's called The Hidden Costs of the Petrodollar System.
Yeah.
And a couple paragraphs down, it says, the world relies on the US dollar and US treasuries, giving America unparalleled and outsized economic dominance. Kind of when you say that, explains the $40 billion that they're deciding to send over to Ukraine. As of 2021, nearly 90% of international currency transactions are in dollars. 60% of foreign exchange reserves are held in dollars, and almost 40% of the world's debt is issued in dollars. Even though the United States only accounts for around 20% of global GDP. So I read that, Alex, right? And what I'm thinking is that the U.S. government has a lot to lose, and the people of the United States as well, if the U.S. dollar loses global reserve status. Do you believe that the U.S. government is going to fight Bitcoin because of that? You mentioned it earlier, how Biden and potentially Janet Yellen could demonize self-custody or, perhaps the energy usage of miners. Do you think that's why they would do something like that?
I think the narrative is going to change over time. I think that today, yes. I think that elites who have benefited from the easy monetary policies of the last 20, 30 years are going to fight it. Yes. I think that long term, though, I think Bitcoin's good for America. I've said this many times repeatedly. I think that Bitcoin resonates with America's founding values, not actions, but values. What is Bitcoin? It's free speech, property rights, and peer-to-peer global commerce. That's unstoppable. Those vibe very well with America's founding values. If you read the Declaration of Independence or the Constitution, etc. If you look at a dictatorship like the CCP, guess what? Guess what they need? They need censorship, confiscation, and closed capital markets. So Bitcoin just doesn't vibe well with them. So I think you're going to go through this initial phase of American policymakers not understanding what's going on and fighting Bitcoin. But eventually there's going to be too many people in the U.S. government who realize what's happening, whether it's Warren Davidson or Cynthia Lummis or Hester Peirce or, the mayor of Miami who's going to run for president as a Republican candidate, or Ted Cruz, or any of these young Democrats running all across the nation, like Eric Rhodes and all these other folks. Like there's just this wave of political interest. So I do think eventually, Warren Davidson, I was on a panel with him and he told me that he thinks this will like redeem America in many ways. And I think what happens is that we decide to lean into Bitcoin. We become a strong Bitcoin nation. Our separated, decentralized status with states and strong states' rights, I think, really helps there because you're going to have competition for Bitcoin mining, Bitcoin companies. I just see like a future where 6102 is impossible given what Satoshi gave us. Like it's just not. Some people will be dumb enough to keep, or ignorant enough to keep their Bitcoin on Coinbase or whatever. But a lot of us won't be, and we'll know. And the more we can educate people, the better. And then that prevents us from getting sucked into the 6102 route. But I think we'll be able to fight that. I want to be optimistic about that. I have to be. We have to be, because or else we're just toast. I'm not so optimistic about friends of ours who live under dictatorships. I don't think it's going to go so well for them. It can be a lifeline, but I think that they're going to have to try workarounds, escape, hide. It's going to be rough. But at the end of the day, it does provide that lifeline to anybody. And ultimately, I think that if America does go down this route, it becomes more of a, an economy based on a Bitcoin standard, or let's say a Bitcoin exchange standard, which would be kind of similar to Bretton Woods, where maybe there's a couple fiat currencies that the whole world uses, but they're pegged to a redeemable rate where they can exchange a certain number of dollars for a certain amount of Bitcoin. Then that kind of fixes what's been happening with the U.S. over the last 5 decades, which is this insane debt problem that we have, because no matter how indebted we become, our currency remains strong because of the petrodollar, eurodollar system. People need dollars. So once that system's broken and the wheel breaks, we'll become more like a normal nation, where if we are very indebted, our currency is going to get weak, and then therefore our exports are going to get strong, and we're going to have a rising middle class and manufacturing base again, until our currency gets too strong, and then we weaken again. And this is a natural flow that happens with the other states and nations of the world. It happens with everyone except for us, because we're like reserve currency. Well, I believe in a future where 20, 30 years from now, or whenever it is, there is no country that has that issues the reserve currency. Bitcoin will be the reserve currency. So I think it restores order, I think, in America, and in a sense of justice. And I honestly think I'm not someone who believes in redistributionism or anything like that, but I think America will be a little more equal. I think there'll be less grotesque inequalities. I mean, if you think about the pandemic monetary policy, what happened in the last few years, the 0.01% got like so much richer, and the average American didn't do well, right? And that's a product of monetary policy and of the Cantillon effect. I mean, there are other reasons for it, but that's one of the prime factors there. So once you remove that, I just am more optimistic about the future. So I would say that yes, in the short term, Bitcoin is a threat to the existing system, but like a phoenix rising from the ashes, there'll be a better system on the other side. So I hope that makes sense.
That makes perfect sense, and that makes me very bullish. And it sounds like Bitcoin fixes this, like everything.
I think Bitcoin fixes America. Yeah,
it really does. So, Alex, in chapter 4, it's called "Bitcoin is a Trojan Horse for Freedom." By the way, it's awesome article, Bitcoin Magazine article. You should definitely check it out. And one of the passages says, "The financial establishment is simply beginning to like the way it looks. It promises great riches, and that is no mirage. It will continue to deliver, but most of the elites do not realize what they are bringing into the inner sanctum." So could you elaborate a little bit on that?
Yeah, when you see these billionaire guys go on TV and talk about Bitcoin and how they like it as whether it's like Paul, right? Paul Jones or Bill Miller or whatever. I mean, they realize what's happening. They realize, like, in the next decade, I'm sure Ray Dalio will eventually change his tune. He'll start saying, Bitcoin or whatever. But these guys, these macro investors, that they like it because they think it's going to be a hedge against instability or fiat inflation, etc. They could care less about the cypherpunks. They don't give a shit about. I mean, maybe they do, but like we should assume they don't care about privacy or our ability to protest the government or protect ourselves against government overreach or any of that stuff. I don't think that they care. Maybe some of them do. Like maybe we start to think there are a couple billionaires out there, like maybe Dorsey and a few others who are like really like they get it. But we should just assume most of them don't. They're gonna want Bitcoin anyway because of the NGU part. That's all they care about. And look, over the next 5-10 years, they'll be richly rewarded. Like, Bitcoin will continue to function with its NGU property. But my argument is that it's connected to FGU, freedom go up. Like the more people who are in Bitcoin, the more resilient the network becomes, the harder it becomes to stop, the more talent flows in, the better UX the apps get, the more robust it becomes, the more features it gets. I'm someone who believes that when we look back, in 2050 at, the first 40 years of Bitcoin or whatever, and we think about who are the 10 most important Bitcoiners, like probably like only 2 or 3 of them have even gotten involved yet in Bitcoin. Like, so the more that it like compels the world, the more talent and creativity comes into the space and the better it gets to use. Like we shouldn't forget that from 1997 to 2007, the internet went from a dial-up modem to the iPhone. So we're going to go through that over the next decade. Like we're in like the iPhone, we're in like the dial-up stage of Bitcoin right now. Like you can sort of see where it's going, right? Like we get the basic precept is there. Like you and I can communicate on the internet, like ideally with no intermediary. And it's going to change the world. That was like you could have that conclusion in 95. Like I was playing Counter-Strike in the late 1990s as a kid. Like I knew where we were going. Like we weren't going away from the internet, right? So now we know we're not going away from Bitcoin. We know it's going to change the world. We know the basic functionality of it. We can send, receive, do commerce, save without the state. Like we get that. But who the fuck knows what we're going to be able to do with it in 10 years, 20 years? I mean, it's just beyond our comprehension. So I'm very excited about that future, and that future will be ushered in by unwilling ushers, is my point. Like the people who are going to pile a ton of money into this thing, a lot of them are going to be anti-freedom. I mean, look, I would say we received a reasonable draw with El Salvador being the first nation state. I mean, I'm on record, obviously, as being very critical of Bukele, but I mean, it wasn't North Korea, it wasn't Saudi Arabia, and eventually I believe that all those states are eventually going to adopt. So we'll have to fight that battle later. But I mean, things are going to get dicey. Like people who don't care about or even hate freedom will be forced to adopt Bitcoin is kind of my thesis there. And I look forward to seeing that continue to play out over the coming decades.
That made me incredibly bullish. Phil, do you want to? I saw you get interested a little bit. Do you want to ask Alex a question before I read the next passage?
No, actually, what I was doing was I was writing down all of Alex's quotes. There's like 4 amazing things that he said right there, and that's what I was doing. But I just wanted to go back to one of the points that you made, right, about embracing FGU, Freedom Go Up technology. So, okay, part of that, right? Part of that. What do you think, like, when places like North Korea reluctantly embrace it, what do you see are some of the challenges that they're going to have? Because I've played this over 1,000 times in my head, and unfortunately, all I ever come up with is this general, well, the government's going to have to figure out a way to provide value. Like that's like as far as my thinking goes, but like what kind of challenges do you foresee with them having to do this reluctantly? Because I'm also thinking, like, do they come out straight out tell the people that they're hoarding Bitcoin? I mean, those are pretty communist, you know.
Yeah, no, I think so. I think Chivo is helpful because it gives us a model of what governments might do. And I honestly think Chivo is probably the most, let's say, I hate to say it, but more towards the freedom-friendly angle of or possibility of what other governments are going to do. So, I mean, the thing is, Chivo is for all of its warts, it's still connected to the open Bitcoin network, right? Like that's like, it's not like the U.S. government's going to come out with a fintech app and connect it to Bitcoin. That's just not happening. So, I think when you look at Russia, right before the war, they proposed a bill, which obviously will get passed or whatever. It's not like there's democracy. And basically, like what you're looking at in Russia is a government that is okay with Bitcoin use, but every single transaction needs to be paired with identity. They want to control that. They want to create like white label Bitcoin, right? Like they want basically Chivo with no off ramps, right? So I think that's the dictator model. Like you'll probably see is confiscation or theft of mining equipment so that states can use their monopoly of energy to mine. I think that's probably going to happen. As Saifedean has said, though, that the state is not going to be very good at mining. Like usually centrally planned, bureaucrats aren't very good in competing with the open market. So we'll see how well they do there. Probably not that well, but they may do that. I think they're going to eventually wisen up and save in Bitcoin the reserves. Essentially, they'll be, instead of FX reserves, instead of having dollars or yuan or whatever, they'll have some Bitcoin, and then they'll try to fend off the inevitable wave of Bitcoin adoption by forcing people to use the state app with very harsh penalties if you're caught not using it. And that's kind of like, I think it's a dark future, but I think it's one we have to admit may happen. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And I think you bring up a really interesting point about not letting people off of those ramps, right? Or essentially limiting the type of wallets that they can use, stuff like that. So, yeah, I can definitely see a bit of a dystopian dark future for those countries, right? As they adopt Bitcoin.
I mean, think about gold and the way gold was killed. Like, the government managed to confiscate it all, and essentially they allow, outside of holding, I mean, a smaller percentage of gold is, I think, held in houses and jewelry and stuff. Like a huge amount of it is held by custodians, right? And that stuff's rehypothecated. It's there's paper gold. I mean, we don't really know how much gold there is like in the hands of these organizations, and that's allowed them to restrict the price of gold. I mean, quite obviously, depress it over time. So, I think the governments are going to be, it's interesting with governments, they may try to do something similar. The cool part is they can't because there is no, like the UK and the US basically got together and they put most of the world's gold at the government level, like in Fort Knox and a few other places, right? That's not going to, Bitcoiners won't so easily give up. The cool part is there's a bunch of crazy Bitcoiners who probably hold, I don't know, millions of Bitcoin are in the hands of true believers. And yeah, the US government can scrap its, I mean, look, they could mine Look, most Bitcoin's been mined, right? So they could mine a little bit of Bitcoin, like relatively speaking, right? This is the good news is like we got to like 18 or whatever million Bitcoin mined before governments got involved. Like that was key. Like that would have been really shitty if we'd only gotten like 1% of the way through, and then they could mine 90% with their energy monopolies. The good fucking news is that the best they can do is mine a couple million out of the being a small part of what is out there, and really they'll just be. I mean, even these evil governments, the cool part is if they try to do like some sort of confiscation and mine Bitcoin, they're securing our Bitcoin. Like they're working for us. Like as people say, they're slaves to the network. So they're going to be willing slaves to the Bitcoin network. So I think that's interesting to think about. I don't think Bitcoin can fall the same fate as gold. I mean, we should definitely be adversarial and be vigilant and think about how it could fail. But look, man, it was designed to not fall the fate of gold, and it's really up to us as Bitcoiners and you guys as educators to remind people to hold their own Bitcoin. And if enough people hold their own Bitcoin, I mean, it is going to be really freaking tough to stop. I mean, that's the truth of it, man.
I tweeted that the other day. I said taking Bitcoin into self-custody is revolutionary in nature. If enough,
that's the revolution, man.
If enough people do it, we win. So, Alex, one last question.
Sure.
And I have to give a little bit of context. So it's from the chapter, The End of Super Imperialism. I'm going to read a passage. It says, the unique ability of the U.S. government, Hudson says, to borrow from foreign central banks rather than from its own citizens is one of the economic miracles of modern times. And when I read that, I connected with a buddy of mine, right? Someone I grew up with. I've been trying to orange pill him for 5 years, but he works at Goldman. And I always wonder, like, why does he not understand? And he brought up a really good example the other day. He said, Nico, imagine if we went through the pandemic and the Federal Reserve wasn't allowed to print the way it did, it would have been catastrophic. So I think it comes from, the Keynesian perspective on the economy rather than, the Austrian, which is like, look, there's market cycles. It is what it is. You just have to let it crash. And from the ashes, new businesses are born. So, but I think he had a point in the fact that maybe, right, the Federal Reserve's ability to print softened the blow for some people, right? And, and they just outsourced all that debt. What are your thoughts on that, Alex? Was that a good thing? Was that a bad thing? I think right now we're starting to experience the hangover as the Federal Reserve starts to raise rates. But what are your thoughts on that? What would your response be to someone in his position?
The super imperialism quote and chapter really discusses this incredible thing that the U.S. government pulled off. I don't think they knew it would happen back then when they first did it, but through the petrodollar pact, which I cover, and then through the fact that as a result of the petrodollar system, the U.S. dollar became like the most desirable financial collateral in the eurodollar system and in the financial markets. We've built this like unstoppable kind of train that just like runs itself. Like it's got this, to be fair, very genius dynamic where it forces other nations to need our fiat money that we can print for nothing. So they have no choice but to fund our wars and our inefficient social programs and all that stuff because they need our dollars, and they as rational economic actors, they want our debt more than any other country's debt. And that was something that was a political creation. Now it later picked on a life of its own, and now it's just like, obviously you'd rather have dollars than like Sudanese pounds or whatever. But it that was a political creation. And I think that when you look at someone who's basically supporting what you said, your friend or whatever, that supports this idea of like this system being beneficial, you have to look at who's benefiting. Cui bono, right? And yeah, Goldman Sachs has certainly benefited. Big banks have benefited. The moral hazard has been removed. They don't have to be that careful anymore. They know that there's going to be a Fed put or a bailout. So it makes their life much more cushy. It's basically like they're bowling and they have, rails on the sides now. They can't go in the gutter. Like literally, it'd be very hard to go in the gutter these days, right? I mean, look at what happened in March 2020. As you say, in a traditional business cycle, guess what? Like, but the bond market is like a organism, and it sensed disaster. Like it forget like your views on the virus or whatever. It sensed that the world was going to contract and depress and deflate. And, therefore bonds started to lose value, stocks, et cetera, started to lose value. So the Fed came in artificially, right, and disrupted that natural cycle and tried to prop it up and backstop the credit markets and the bond markets and stock markets and stuff like that, right? In an unnatural way, right? Well, guess who benefits from that? Again, we have to think the elites. It's all Cantillon effect stuff, like all the 1%, 2%, whatever. So for some people, inarguably, the post-71 political economy has been amazing. If you work in defense or finance or real estate or whatever, it's been really good for you. If you're a coastal elite in the United States, someone like me, right? Most of my friends, they've done very well. But if you're not, if you're like a working class manufacturing industry kind of like family in America, or if you're an emerging market country, et cetera, maybe it hasn't been so great. Like maybe your living standards have been actually essentially stagnant. Maybe your wages haven't gone up that much. Maybe things are getting more expensive. So I think it just depends on who you are. I mean, it's a very, again, the petrodollar system and the strong dollar and the $30 trillion in debt we have absolutely benefited people, and they've helped the U.S. government do things it would otherwise unable to be doing. Like, for example, run very costly forever wars in Asia and in other exotic places that the average American doesn't even know are happening. That's only possible with the fiat system. So I think that, again, many people have benefited from this, including the financial sector. If you look in the 70s, the financial sector was less than 10% of the economy. Now it's more than 20%. So, the economy is moving away from productive capital and businesses that actually produce good things that people use. And it's moving to financialization, which is just this endless shell game, which isn't in the end of the day that much different from what Luna was, right? So the question is, where do we go from here? And I think the best recommendation is to read Alan Farrington and Sasha Meyer's book, Bitcoin is Venice, because it's an incredible tome, hundreds of pages that are very dense, but very enlightening on what that future might look like, and why doesn't the current system work, and why isn't this actually capitalism? So that's my kind of closing thought, is to go read Bitcoin is Venice. It's an incredible work. So
awesome.
That's what I would say.
Appreciate it. Oh, well, guys, that was the news. Phil, there was an open source software release today. Why don't you tell everybody about it?
Software releases brought to you by CipherSafe. Check them out, cyphersafe.io. Don't trust your seed to that flimsy little piece of paper that you get with your hardware wallet. Store your seed in the Cypher Wheel or the all-new Cypher Grid. They both come with a tamper-resistant wire, and the grid comes with a punch tool. All right, we've got Galoy Money version 0.1.129 that was released. It just released today. The link is down below in the show notes. Guys, don't forget to check us out on our audio-only platforms, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Anchor. If you want to stream us sats, check us out on fountain.fm. You could stream us sats through Breeze.
Awesome. Thank you, Phil. All right, guys, before we go, I want to give a very quick shout out to our clothing sponsor, RepresentLTD.com. Phil and I wear the hoodies every single day. They're coming out with Simply Bitcoin merch and Bitcoin merch. Definitely go check it out. You can take advantage of the promo code down below. I also want to give a very, very special shout out to our awesome guest, Alex Gladstein. He's the Chief Strategy Officer at the Human Rights Foundation. You can go give him a follow on Twitter at Gladstein, and definitely go check out his book. If you want to know more about what we were talking about in the news, it's called Check Your Financial Privilege. It's on Amazon. It's a great book. Anyways, guys, that was our show. If you enjoyed the show, you know what to do. Subscribe to Simply Bitcoin, and we'll see you tomorrow, guys, for a brand new episode.
To quote our awesome guest, the more Bitcoin compels the world, the more talent comes into the space.